Hey, thank you for joining us again. Hi, thank you for joining us. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience caused earlier. There was a small glitch that we fixed, and thank you so much for joining us again. Let me give you a quick introduction about today's talk. This is our second talk session about where we're trying to have an architect join us on Instagram Live, and he or she is going to address us and engage us with various discussions, and we also have a question and answer session. So today with us, this is our second episode. If you guys have joined us for the first, it was with architect Akshat Bhatt, who is the principal architect of architecture discipline. And today with us, we are going to have Ms. Priyamvada Singh, who is the founder and principal architect of Common Ground Practice. She'll be joining us shortly. Please hold on and we can commence the talk in a while. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you guys are all doing very well. Today, Ms. Priyamvada will be engaging us on a discussion about emergent architecture in a corona positive world. She'll be joining us quickly. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us. This is an initiative of FEET in collaboration with Epistle Communications. We're trying out a new thing and hope you guys like it. We'll have Ms. Priyamvada joining us. Yes, there you go. Today is going to be a very interesting session where we're going to have a talk about emergent architecture in a corona positive world. Thank you for joining us. And I would request.
Hi.
Ma'am.
Finally. Sorry, I have not gone home before this, so I had no idea what was going on.
That's all right.
Hey.
Sure. Yeah. I will. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Done. So, guys, this is Ms. Priyamvada Singh with us. And before we start, let me give a quick introduction about you. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome Ms. Priyamvada Singh, who is an award-winning architect, the founder of Common Ground Practice. Ma'am, I think there is an echo, right?
Slight, yes.
Okay. Can you wear your earphones? Because I think if we could.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she'll be running us quickly. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. Yes, perfect.
I think your connection is a little weak too, so maybe.
Okay, sure. All right. I'll.
Hello?
Yeah, cool. I think it's perfect now.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. So before we start, let me just give a quick introduction about you and introduce you to our viewers today. So it is a great pleasure for me to welcome Ms. Priyamvada Singh, who is an award-winning architect and the founder of Common Ground Practice based in New Delhi. She is a registered architect with the American Institute of Architects in New York, USA. She's more than a decade of experience in architecture and design, and she's worked and her work is spanning in about 4 continents and 13 countries, including Switzerland, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the USA. And she spent 8 years in association with top architects around the world, among which are the Padma Shri and the Pritzker recipient B.B. Doshi, and the architects of the World Trade Center, Skidmore, Owings, and other top firms. And Ms. Priyamvada has always been a very engaging and active participant with the academic community. In fact, she has been a faculty at SPA Delhi, and she served on the juries of the Columbia University in New York, SEPT University, Ahmedabad, Sushant School of Art and Architecture, Gurgaon, and also SPA Delhi. And her research interests are an interplay of technologically advanced and traditional techniques and ecological practices of built environment. She has presented research papers at top conferences and contributed to several books on architecture. And she's also been published in international architecture journals, and we can just keep going. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, ma'am.
Thank you. After that introduction, thank you very much. Okay, so today I thought that, instead of talking about very specific solutions and things like that, because clearly where we are right now in terms of the pandemic or what we are facing in general, I don't think anybody has solutions, and I'd be, too this thing to say that I know what is going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually leave you guys with some propositions and some ways of thinking about, how by looking back at where we started from, right? Like looking back in the past, what possible futures can we imagine or reimagine for ourselves, right? And I would like to start by quoting Juhani Palasama. I think all of you would know him. He's a Finnish architect and writer, architectural writer of great import. He recently, actually on the 13th itself, he just wrote an article and about this very, about the pandemic, and he calls it a break for critical thinking, physical confinement and freedom of imagination. Yeah. And I'll just read specific excerpts from there and then lead into what I want to talk about. So the first thing that really spoke to me about, what he says is that he says, architecture too has been losing its humane and existential ideals and directions. Instead of possessing sufficient ethical, cultural and artistic autonomy to create culturally and existentially meaningful environments, the practice of architecture has turned into a professionalist service in the interests of political, cultural, corporate, and commercial clients and investors. Instead of mediating human relationships, and I'll repeat that, instead of mediating human relationships, material and mental, with the world, architecture is expected to raise the commercial and publicity image and monetary value of projects. As it turns into a self-centered, aestheticized practice, architecture is relinquishing its fundamental, existentially mediating task. Right? I'd like to really again point out again, existentially mediating task. At the same time, architectural projects are increasingly guided by regulations, processes, standards, and bureaucratic practices. Administrators have taken the role of the visionary and empathetic artist designer. So basically, what this says to me, or what really caught my attention, was the fact that somewhere along the way, and he goes on to talk about, how the humaneness in how we think about built environments, or the contextualization of how we build our built environments these days is really being lost. And maybe now is the moment that we sort of look back and come back to, where we were and rethink the future in that sense. So in my sense, I think what really has struck me, and I mean, as a practice, we've always wanted to, look at collective architecture and the sort of very fine intertwining of the public and the private, right? Now, if you look back at our ancient architecture, even 100 years back, or a little more than 100 years back, within the subcontinent, you will see that most of our built environments, right, never were monofunctional. They were always multifunctional. By that I mean hybrid, typologies. So if it was a temple complex, it had within it an education center. It also had like a bazaar coming out of it. It was used for community services. It was used for marriages. It was actually a community space, right? And our public space more and more is getting exclusive. So public is purely public, private is purely private. And even if you look at the houses of the past, right, the typologies like the courtyard or the stoop, or the way that the semi-public zones started to intermingle with the public zones of the street, they created a sense of community, which somewhere we are losing, and we are creating these exclusive boundaries between the private and the public. So that's the first thing that I would like to throw as a proposition, that I think that we need to go back to more multicultural and multi-use and inclusive buildings. Like what I meant by inclusive was exactly that. Now, this also can be looked at two levels. One is that we are all facing this whole thing of, how do we remain socially connected, despite the fact that we have to be physically, in separate spaces. This is, again, like, one is at the sort of, level of, I would say, the strata that we are within. So let's say that, I live in house khas. It's easy for me to stand out in my balcony. It affords me opportunity to, interact with the people that I live around, and, we can safely be distant from each other and still be able to sort of have some sort of social interaction. But I think the larger problem that has occurred in our society is that we are not mixing our stratas anymore, right? Like there is, if you look at the migrant issue, what is going on, that there is no equity in our housing or in our shelter. And I think one of the main basic tenets of architecture or of any kind of building environment is providing shelter, right? Health is the first thing that you look at, but the second thing is shelter. And I feel this is something that actually Tatiana Bilbao spoke about in a talk that she gave several years back, where, she said that we probably as architects haven't thought enough about shelter, where it really is required, right? So our thinking of shelter, or what we celebrate mostly as shelter, barring some architects out there, of course, is housing for the well-off people, or people like ourselves, or rich people, right? But have we really, as architects, taken on the role of social activists and thought about shelter for the most disenfranchised person out there on the street? And I think right now, seeing exactly what is going on with our migrant population, especially being architects, and seeing so much labor out there that is, being affected by something like this, it becomes our duty, almost a duty, to now rethink that how can we provide within our private and public spaces and our urban cities, our like large cities, spaces of equity and health, like healthy spaces which are equitable even for our service classes. We cannot just leave people behind and just think about ourselves. So inclusivity in that sense as well, not just in terms of the built environment, but because I feel that the built environment is a result of how you think and how you maintain relationships, right? Exactly what he says, mediating relationships. I think relationships are at multi-level. It's not just about spatial relationships, but it's also the physical relationships between people, between societies, between stratas. How do you make it as equitable for everybody, and provide agency to the most disenfranchised, that they can rise up and reach to a level that all of us aspire to? So that was the first thing. The second thing that, again, I will go back to Palasama, his quote. Just give me a second here. One of his quotes. Yeah, so I'll just end what I was saying here by saying that, he says, in our rush, we have lost our understanding of entities, contextualities, feedbacks, interactions, and interdependencies, right? So I think interdependency is something that has really come to the fore. Like, we all realize how intertwined and interdependent we are. No matter how much money you have, or what's strata in society you have, you're just as affected as the guy next door. Yes, you may be a little more privileged, that you'll probably survive longer, but if you don't think about everybody else, you also will not survive, right? So that interdependency is something which is, I think, has to be imbibed in how we think about our built environments going forward. We have largely lost the wisdom of contextual thinking. Again, like coming back to context, right? And then he speaks about something which is very interesting, about a sense of placelessness and a sense of, I would say this unrootedness, of course, for the lack of a better word. So he says that historians tell us that ancient Greeks faced the past and had their backs turned towards the future. So they were imagining the future and not like, running towards it. Modern humankind has turned around. We experience the past becoming distant behind our back while looking towards the future. Curiously, we are looking into the future, but do not visualize it. And I think this is exactly the problem, that, we are building, but what are we building to? We have no idea. We're kind of fooling ourselves, in some sort of a somnambulism that, yeah, we're building the right things, and this is all for the larger economic good of the world. I don't think it is. We are increasingly living in a placeless and timeless, simultaneous and instantaneous world. So I think the instantaneous part, again, really spoke to me, right? Like, again, this whole thing of, travel has become such a, the movement of bodies. Yeah. It's just like, you get one weekend and it's almost a crime that you are staying home, that, you don't want to be home. And I think a lot of the loneliness, etc., that we are feeling is because we've forgotten how to be in one place and stay still. I think staying still or just pausing is extremely important too. So here again comes, the point of a dwelling. What is a dwelling, right? Like, in the past, again, your houses were never silos. They were never like, I can tell you from a personal example. I mean, this is not the greatest example, but I lived in New York for a very long time. And, currently, obviously, you all know what is going on in New York. It's a bad situation, especially in Manhattan. Now, space is very small. So most of my friends who are there are feeling supremely isolated. Like, they feel a sense of, getting not isolated, but feeling, the cabin fever. To the contrary, I'm in Delhi now. I'm in a larger apartment with 9 inches walls around me. I cannot even hear my neighbor. The sannata, or for the lack of a better word again, is really eerie. And sometimes I think that it is better to be in a space where at least even a voice or some sense is connecting you to another human being, right? So the point being that, and also the way the streets work over there or the public space works over there, you can actually step out and take a walk. For me to step out and take a walk in Delhi is near impossible without getting paranoid and worrying about, oh, what is going to happen, etc. So I think it's not about the amount of, you again think about these connections and create very fine lines between what is private and what is public, right? And the whole, I think we'll have to sort of rethink or talk about, the collective and the individual's role within each other. Right, like again, to give an example of a religious space, the Siddhi Sayyid Mosque in Ahmedabad. It's a very simple structure. There's a small wall, then there's an ablution space, water, right, and then there's a little bit of a walk with some trees around it, and then this open structure, completely open structure, like colonnade that you pass through, and then it's 3 sides. It's enclosed with jalis. So it's a completely public space. But the way that it has been defined, within that public space, there is absolute, privacy that an individual feels. So there is this sense of connectedness, yet you can be completely private in that space. So if we were thinking of spaces like that, right, like the fine nuances, I don't see why we cannot go back to thinking about how we build our environments, in the future in the same way. And also another very important thing I think about multi-purpose or hybrid spaces, right, like which have multi-functions within them or multi-uses within them, is that they really act as social catalysts, right? So for instance, again, going back to my favorite example, temple complex or a mosque complex, the bazaar that ran out of it was not necessary that people who were selling flowers or selling, and you'll see that now also in the Meenakshi Amma and all these complexes, that every religion, every caste, right, will have a little store or whatever. The Foolwala will be from some other place or whatever. So there's this serendipitous sort of opportunity for people to meet each other, to be able to, you're always facing the other. Was it done fantastically in the past? Sure not. I mean, we still had a lot of, inequity. We still had a lot of systems which were, not giving agency to certain people and was giving more agency to certain people. But I think it was certainly more nuanced, and there was more opportunity within the way that we were thinking about our spaces, right? And the last thing I think, like after the rootedness that I'm talking about, I think is which a lot of people have been talking about for quite some time, and in the past, I would say 5-6 years actually, this has really taken on a whole new meaning. I mean, a lot of attention has been given to this by a lot of architects and urbanists actually, is biophilia, or what this other theorist calls ecotones, right? And the idea that you are building with the environment and not just, nature, but the entire environment around you, right? So how do you think about buildings now as minimal footprints, as something that, respects the sort of ground that they inhabit or are going to inhabit? How light can they be? Again, we have so many examples, the temple in Japan, I'm completely blanking on the name, but the one which has 2 grounds, and every 12 years or something, it is rebuilt. So they literally dismantle it. It's a whole ceremony, and then they remantle it on the ground next to it, so that the earth that it was sitting on can refurbish itself, right? So just simple ideas like this. Like, can we rethink, how we see it ourselves in something of this sort? What else? And there was a last quote that I wanted to actually just read out from. Just give me a second.
Sure. These are very interesting things which we haven't even heard about and thought about.
Yeah. No, so somebody had asked me in the questions that you sent about books. So I would say they're not really books, but there are certainly people that you should be reading, right? And I am extremely inspired by anybody and everybody who writes about our field. And some people that I can name have been extremely, extremely influenced by internationally and nationally. Both is one is Kenneth Frampton, Reinhold Martin, Juhani Pallasama, extremely, extremely influential. Cynthia Davidson, Peter Eisenman. I could go on, right? And in India, I think one of my greatest influences personally has been, he was a professor of mine to Professor Yatin Pandya, who I think everybody knows, Yatin Bhai, who was at Vastu Shilp as well. And of course, B.V. Doshi, Charles Correa. I think Prem Chandrawakar, I think, phenomenal how he writes. K.T. Ravindran, A.G.K. Menon. I think like just reading, what others, how architects are writing about their work, or if you like somebody's work, read about why they did what they did and what is the thought behind why they built what they built, right? I think that is where a lot of the nuance of what we do really comes through, right? So to speak to the last comment on biophilia, sorry, I cannot find it. Just give me a second here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, we should agree that man was not made in the image of God, but as a participant in the continuous evolutionary system and its countless processes. Moreover, evolution is not history, but an ongoing process. The most crucial thing for us, citizens of post-industrialist consumer culture, is to grasp and accept our fundamental relationship to and participation in the utterly complex process of biological life. This is the theme of Edward O. Wilson's significant books such as Biophilia, The Human Bond with Other Species of 1984. This was in 1984. I think the Ecotone book also, I'm again blanking on the name, I can put it on your thing later on, is also around the same time. That's in the 60s or 70s that book was written. And he goes on to say, our greatest problem arises from the fact that we do not know what we are and we do not agree on what we want to become, the biologist argues. Wilson defines biophilia as the science and ethics of life. So I think ethics is something which, very tough to define. What is ethical for you may not be for me. And I think there has to be a critical rethinking of ethics as well and all of this. But I think that is something that, we've started looking at the way we build and our architecture for that matter as just technological or skill based or a product. It is not a simple product. It's a product of various things. What are those various things? What are those? Simple things like, light, ventilation. I think even those things are 90% of people are not thinking about it when they are, drawing that first line or I don't know, like repurposing a building. These simple aspects of how you are connecting that built form to what is surrounding it, which is light and, air at the most basic. These are the sort of things that I think we have to sort of go back to. We have to go back to the slowness and the sort of time and stillness it requires to create a built environment, which actually functions and works to its most efficient use. And resource efficiency, I think I spoke about, I had written about that also. I think that is something which is a no-brainer, especially in a country like India, where we are very, very resource-starved. And, there was a McKinsey report of, I think, 2009 or something, where they projected that to meet all our infrastructure demands for, all the people that we have, we will need 11 or 16 Chicagos, something of that sort, to build that many Chicagos, right? Now, we do not have the resources to do that. And why would you do that? So is there a way that we can rethink what we have and what we are going to build in a more, multifunctional manner where a single building can meet multiple functions? And like I said, we have enough and more precedents in our past to look at and to learn from, and to imbibe and think of new typologies. I think like the future really, again, I'm projecting. Nobody knows. It's too soon to say anything. But the future in general, pandemic or no pandemic, I think lies in really thinking of new hybrid typologies, new ways of constructing or building or creating these dwellings and shelters or spaces of work, whatever that you'd like to say, spaces of shelter, essentially. Yeah.
Let me just pause you there. So when we were talking about these new hybrids, your thing is that we have to make it inclusive buildings. Yeah. Is that
yes.
Right? So at this point of time when we are, so much into social distancing, I can see, I go to the market and I can see those circles drawn for me to maintain a social distance. How do you think this inclusivity would actually work out?
That's a good question. So again, I think like the point about inclusivity in this scenario would be that let's look at an office building, right? It'll become more and more difficult now. You have to keep half the staff. You cannot, you'll probably be functioning 4 days a week or something of that sort. But as an exclusive office, let's say that I have taken up an office and it's a 4-story building or whatever. I was going to keep 200, 300 people in it, and now I can only house 150 people, and I'm going to use it only for half of the time that I was going to use it earlier. But my rental will not go down that substantially. So is there a way that, we can share this space now so that 4 days it is functioning as my office, 3 days it's functioning as your office? Of course, there are issues of how do we sanitize, but you'll have to sanitize regardless, whether you're using it or somebody else is using it, right? Or can there be between?
Yeah, sure.
Can there be, ways of, if we are designing new things going forward, right? Can there be ways of, let's say, bringing in, other functions within, like spaces which can function as other things? So a conference room, for instance, you just change the way that you enter into the conference room and you just come in from outside. That becomes a meeting space for another person who doesn't have the opportunity to, sort of buy, rent a full-fledged office space. So that becomes, at one level, I feel that it is, the minute you think co-working or you think co-use, we are all freaking out because how are we going to do that? But at the same time, I feel that, just leaving things vacant is also not the answer, right? Like that you maximize the usage, of course, with whatever precautions that have to be taken, which will anyway have to be taken. So in some way, you would be able to manage better is what I'm saying. And inclusivity, I was also talking of a much larger idea of, trying to create space for all kinds of people within that, right?
And I think this reminds me of the Renaissance period where people were trying to create spaces for everybody, and Medici was I remember this lesson from last year when we were told that Lorenzo Medici was commissioning his architects to create spaces which were so beautiful that there was no hierarchy in the community, and all kinds of people would come and participate, and so that the rich don't seclude themselves to their own private spaces, but instead come and participate in a public space, right? So is that something?
Yeah, well, I think that it has to be made what's the word, accessible, right? And accessible to everybody. So again, let's take the example of a mall, right? Like we could argue that it's probably the most quote unquote democratic public space, or the most used public space that we have today in the country, right? Anywhere, at least in India. But there also, there are ways of siphoning off a certain population, right? One, it is completely enclosed and it's all air conditioned. There's no relationship. Very few malls, again, a Korea mall in Calcutta and a few more are there, which, actually are streets, or even Gurgaon, Cyber Hub is not bad. Like, it has a street within it and it has some bit of the rootedness. But there is that guard who, there is that point where, how I look and how I'm dressed or whatever, there's a point where I'm stopped, right? I may not be actually stopped. Nobody will say anything to me, but just the whole setup is such that I don't feel like I can access it, right? So how do we make our spaces such that I feel that I can access it? Even our parks, if you look at most of our parks, like, I would say that a lot of times, a lot of people, don't enter into the parks, even if it's Lodi Garden. Lodi Garden, you would argue you see all kinds of people. But there are, the community parks. In certain parts of Delhi, the community parks are supposed to be community parks, but they actually lock them after a certain time. And they do not encourage people beyond, who are the people of the society who are living around there, the workers or a labor or somebody, if they go and sit down over there, they're cast upon. Like, people kind of give them looks, and, after some time they get uncomfortable and they leave. Or even women, for that matter, like, it's not easy for you to just go and sit in a park. So how do you make all of these spaces more accessible? I think for me, what I see is that we've started creating such stark boundaries and such exclusive functions for everything, right? Like an office is an office is an office. A house is like
Sure.
supremely privatized. Like I even want the elevator to now open in my apartment, right? And I want to come into,
Right.
I'll be living in a multi-story building, but I want to like drive in my car and then stop right in front of my lobby, walk into my lobby and into my elevator. I should not see anybody else.
Right.
Why are you in an apartment block
Right.
then? You know, you should be in a house. Like just create a fortress for yourself. So this mentality is, I think, something which we need to question, you know, when we go out there as architects. I mean, it's not easy, of course, but it's a proposition, right? Like, and it's something that the more that we disconnect ourselves from each other, the more we will disconnect society, and that will create more and more of these, you know, problems. When problems like these happen, we're not ready to face it. We don't know how to, you know, meet out all our demands, right? Like in terms of infrastructure, again, state infrastructure is now at a loss to provide for almost like how many million of our workers out there or migrants out there. If only, you know, state infrastructure like your state houses, libraries, other large public institutions were thought of as they were earlier, कि वो धर्मशाला भी बन सकती है, it can become something else at the same time. If it was thought of as agile, right, it would take no time for the state to respond. Is that, you know,
Right. Um,
is that the way that we make our state buildings, right? A normal person feels intimidated going into it, right? Like a sarkari daftar jana for you and me might be still okay. We might not go in there because it's like, oh my God, who's going to deal with the bureaucracy? But, you know, a person from a certain low income, this thing it's just such intimidating architecture. If you look at it, right, the facade is so intimidating, or the volume of the space is so intimidating, the way you walk through the procession because there's a whole car thing, etc. So can we rethink these things? How do we make what is actually needed to be accessible to everybody accessible to everybody? And I think that's where we come in as designers, because we are creating these identities, we are creating these, you know, these movements and paths and approaches, and hence access. Right. So by inclusive, I'm talking about more of those kind of things. And yes, you're right that, you know, spaces where, I mean, again, like, as you know, I don't even know if there's anything democratic public space left anywhere in the world now, but whatever that you can, right, like where anybody and everybody can have the opportunity to represent themselves, right? I think like
Right.
that sort of a connectedness has to be there. Right, like that's how, at least those are the sort of propositions that, you know, excite me, and are things that we as a practice have tried to do and would like to continue working within. And I think like also social activism, you know, there is, I completely don't agree that you have to be either an aesthetic architect or a social activist, right? You could be a great designer and make very good buildings and still be an activist. We can look at Korea, we can look at Doshi, we can look at Hajar other architects around the world who have done both, right? Like even the guy who got the Pritzker recently. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's not that Tatiana Bilbao, again, right? You know, she does everything from shelter for the most disenfranchised to really fancy things. So it's not that you, and whatever they do is extremely aesthetic. It's not that if you're making shelter for somebody who's a migrant, then it's, you know, not aesthetic and you only bring the aesthetics into something else. So I think that activism has to be part of, and thinking of social values and the values of your culture and your community. These are just things that we should, you know, should be in the DNA of us as designers, is why I would, what I would really urge everybody to think about and rethink these things, you know, and try to imbibe that in your practices, in your studies, in your way forward.
I think it was a very interesting concept to discuss about and think about further. Especially, I like the way you were asking us to think about how to, you know, draw the line between a public space and a private space. I'm sure it was a very thought-provoking idea to, you know, think about and come up with solutions. If you're done, we can take a few questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. we already have a few questions after we posted it yesterday on SPA Diary. We can take from there. And I would also ask the viewers to please post in your questions so that we can take a few more questions directly from here.
Yeah, actually,
At
a lot
this
of people are
same
asking
time,
things, but I wasn't paying attention.
sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. We'd reserve them for the question answer session. Okay, I have a question which is at the end of traditional typologies of offices, restaurants, and etc., how will the interior and furniture design evolve?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. See, again, very soon to say all these things because we don't know if a vaccine comes out and you vaccinate yourself and you're fine. We may be able to not need so much social distancing as we are projecting right now. But if we do need it, then of course, like there are so many designers who are already giving out a lot of ideas on I saw some very interesting things about. Like a pod, acrylic pod just hanging on top of you like a lamp, and there are 4 people sitting on a round table, and you're within your pod and you're eating, but you're still interacting with everybody. I mean, and then there was somebody else who came up with an idea of multiple pods sitting in a row outside in the outdoor space of a restaurant, and so it's 2 people, 3 people are you go yourself, so you are within your pod, but it's all acrylic or glass or whatever, so you can see each other. Again, like I said, too soon to really talk about these things, but in the immediate future, yes. If I were to talk about the projects that we are working on, certainly clients want to think about, antibacterial sort of finishes. How can we keep things more clean? Like instead of tack boards, can we, use some other material, because keeping a fabric is much more difficult, and then whatever fabric that we're using, can that also have antimicrobial things within it? People are thinking more about humidity in spaces, like IOAC systems, catering to that. So services wise and in terms of surfaces, right? Services and surfaces, certainly there is a lot of think on that, and also in terms of the amount of space that you need. And I think that is a great thing, because if you look at the office type, we've been very lucky that we've had clients who wanted wanted decent, not decent, actually better than decent spaces for their employees, and didn't want those cubby hole desks. So we've had the opportunity to do some interesting designs. But I think, like, if you look at how we were going in commercial space, it was literally like 40 square feet or 30 square feet per person, and this includes all of your other functions, right? Like the entire space is divided, and then you say that this is how we are giving you the thing, right? So the fact that now this forces people, clients or the owners of buildings or people who run commercial enterprises, to give more space, and not just space to people, but I think also to breakout spaces. And not breakout spaces, again, I would say, like just go and play something, sure, those kind of things too, but also bring in some a patch of green, maybe a courtyard within your office space. People are thinking about things like that. There was a webinar that I was seeing with Metropolis magazine, did that, and they had all these guys from KPF and Grimshaw, their heads of the office parts, right, a commercial branch, vertical, and they were saying that it's actually an opportunity that has been presented to them, because they were obviously, for the past 5-6 years now, everybody has been trying to do biophilic architecture, specifically in workspaces, since we were spending so much time at work, right? But obviously a lot of times you hit roadblocks with budgets, like how much space are you giving, and still a rental commerce always comes in. So I think now is the opportunity that commerce notwithstanding, you would have to think about these things, that let's say this pandemic gets over, maybe something else happens, and now again I have to keep myself secluded, or we have to work in environments where we can't intermingle with other people. Then a simple thing like having a park within your office, you can go out and get a little bit of a rest, just get some green, get some outdoor fresh air, and come back in. So you don't necessarily have to go out and intermingle with people, right? So things like these, I think, will have to be thought of when we are thinking interior. not just furniture, but also the spaces, the interior spaces, and of course, light and ventilation. I don't think anybody will be able to disregard that, or should I mean, if people do disregard that even after something like this, that'd be pretty sad, but I really don't think that will happen, right? Like the Spanish flu did that. They basically realized that you needed more ventilation, and these shafts and the sizes of shafts, etc. In planning came into in bylaws, sorry, came into existence after the Spanish flu happens, right? So a lot of that will happen and will affect not just our cities at the city level or the building level, but the interior level 100%. Because at the end of the day, you're creating a building for the interior. What you occupy is inside. You're not occupying the outside. I mean, as much, right? So, yeah, that would be my thought on that.
That answer. We have another question, which is about mobility. I can just 1 second. Right. New forms and patterns of urban mobility and cycling to navigate safety. Could that work in a country like India?
I am not an expert on transportation, so I, wouldn't be able to clearly answer this question. But I mean, that should certainly be something that we should make work in India. Whether it can work or not, I'm pretty sure it can. It's also our mentality which doesn't make it work. If you look at Gurgaon, the roads are wide enough, right? Like they're wide enough, there are walking paths, everything, but we have such a car culture, or like non-walking culture. It's not just car culture, that you barely ever see anybody walking. So again, personal anecdote, this happened to me when I was living in Ahmedabad. This happens to me not as much in Delhi, but certainly in Gurgaon. You get off the metro and you decide that you'll just walk over to wherever you're going, whether it's an office or somebody's house, because it's so close by. You're on the street and every auto rickshaw guy will stop and ask you if you want to get on the auto. And everybody who passes you, if they can see you, look at you like you must be crazy on a street. Like, why are you walking? It's kind of looked at as something must be wrong with this person that they're walking, right? You go to a hotel. If you come in an auto rickshaw, firstly, there's a line where they stop you. The auto can't even go all the way to the, to the foyer. Second is that if you walk, again, this has happened to me that I've gotten, come with in a metro and decided to, go to whatever hotel. There was some event. So I said, okay, fine. It's really close to the metro. I'll walk it to the, to the hotel. So the guards at the hotel, when you're walking in, they don't stop you, but they really look at you very weirdly. Like, why are you dressed up and why are you walking? Right. So I think it's a mentality thing also. It's not that our cities are not walkable or they cannot be made cycle friendly. I think they can certainly quite easily be made, friendly to these kind of ways of traversing. If New York can be, we can get cycles in there. I mean, it's also not the easiest place to cycle around. Wasn't, at least when I was living there. Then, I think like larger street spaces like we have certainly can be made and should be. I think that's a very valid question. And I would be one of the first people who would be extremely happy if, we get safer lanes to walk on and cycle on.
Actually, in fact, I think the Yulu bikes which are introduced in Delhi actually do work. I think we ourselves have picked it up a couple of times. I think it's something which is coming up and people might actually be into it in more to come.
Yeah, I think it's cultural. It's really more cultural than space constraint. Yeah.
So we have another question about healthcare. About what you say about new healthcare infrastructure. What can be repurposed and how? What can be repurposed, or what is about the new construction that could come up in the healthcare industry?
Yeah, so I think healthcare, again, we'll have to think about healthcare not just in terms of hospitals or places where you go when you get sick, but also healthcare in terms of not getting sick, right? So again, how can we, make exercising, parks are doing that to some extent. They have all those, gyms and all that stuff. But how do we make health a part of our planning strategies, right? Where you basically take care of yourself so that you don't really need a hospital unless it is absolutely required. So can I don't know, some gyms or ways of exercising, etc., become part of your housing communities. You just have a track, that a running track within it. You create that in offices, you create that in all the spaces. So I think, like, again, to me, integration of all of these things is the most important thing. Like, how do we integrate so that we can make it better? And yes, repurposing, certainly. We will have to think of hub and spoke models, like, which in the near future, at least, where we will be needing to, expand our healthcare system and things like that. And again, a lot of people are thinking about things. We are also proposing some ideas using retired shipping containers. We're in talks with some state governments about that. So again, I think, like, things which are waste, to us, like what really spoke about the idea of shipping containers. It's a project that we had done back in the day in 2015, a prototype, but for a completely different reason. Is that, retired shipping containers are waste material that basically will be trashed. Currently, how they're used, mostly, they are being used for a lot of humanitarian purposes also, but not exclusively for that. And in India, not as much. So the point was that you have a ready structure and you can easily fit it out anywhere that you want. So it's a prefab structure which has mobility inbuilt into it, and it can be just taken wherever the requirement is. So you'd have to obviously make it in such a way that it doesn't go and sit in one place, but can be moved easily, mobile from one place to another. And as and where the need arises, you put it in there. It is monetarily also, economically also cheaper to build than to build a full building. And the fact that it can move makes it much more sustainable and economical as a model. So I think, like, thinking again in terms of, more, again, multi-use, I think it's probably my favorite word, within what we are trying to do, right? Because today we might need that for expanding our health care, or whatever that we need to do for, keeping the keeping the virus within control. But tomorrow, we are back to being normal, or just, the pandemic has subsided and not so many people are falling sick. Then what do you do with that infrastructure? So can it be something which can be repurposed, easily reused into another thing? So if it is, a piece of a box, it can be reutilized tomorrow as an extra classroom. It can be reutilized as a skill training center. And what we had proposed was, in 2015, the prototype was actually for a skill training center. It had certain similar kind of needs, that made us propose that model. So I think, like, you'd have to again think about agility. That's what I meant when I said agile infrastructure, that it can change its purpose, as the need is, to the need that is there.
Right, okay. I think that is all for now. We're done with a few interesting questions. We can take a few questions here before we end.
Okay.
Do you see any questions you would like to answer?
I don't actually. I'm just seeing the last. Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm not really good at
I
this.
think because it says it might get timed out and end abruptly by itself.
That's
so we
fine.
can probably take another question and end it. Yeah. So you can pick the question.
I don't see any questions. People are giving comments which are actually quite nice. Updates. How will they change? How will what change? Is the for community.
Reconfiguring public spaces within the new normal. Answer okay, I think it's how will COVID change the built environment?
I think that's what we basically took.
Yeah. I think it's all repetitive. I don't see anything.
I think I really like this comment. It's by Jamia and Okhla Updates. I think when we were talking about public space or walking and cycling wala part, saying repurposing residual right of way and bringing it into the public realm. I think, like, that's a very good point. Enhancing natural infrastructure. I think these are more of people giving us comments over here, at least what I see. The change is the main thing.
that is about it, I
Yeah, I
guess.
think you've asked me mostly everything over here.
We had a really good time. At least it was a big working session and things which we've not even thought about and stuff like that. It was very, very good to have you with us today.
No, I'm
And I
glad.
hope you've answered, yeah, I hope you've answered a lot of people's queries and ideas about, how are we going to proceed after COVID-19 is going to, what's going to happen in the future and stuff like that. It was very interesting.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you so
and
much.
I just hope that I've left people with some thought, to think about things.
Yeah,
I
I
certainly don't have
absolutely.
answers. Nobody has answers right now, but we can project. And I personally really feel what I would like to leave you all with is that this is seriously a moment, where at least people like us have been afforded an opportunity to reboot and rethink and really redevise what we mean and what we want to make our practices or our future as architects, and really grab it by both hands, especially the students out there, because you all are in an even better position than us. We at least have to think about our offices and surviving and things like that. You literally have the world in front of you, and there couldn't be a better time. There just couldn't be a better time than to really, dig your heels in and reimagine the world. Uh,
And
as
also, thank you
romantic
so
as
much
it
for your book.
sounds. Sorry.
Thank you so much for your book suggestions and authors that you mentioned. It'll also be helpful if you could post it in the post later so that we could go back and those
Yeah,
who
I'll
join
do that.
later
I'll
could
do
go
that
through it.
certainly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks.
Thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you had a good session. We'll see you next time with another architect. Please get in your questions so that we can bombard them next time and get it answered. This is Monisha Raju signing off for now. Thank you so much.